Talk It Like You Stole It, Rick and Morty, Chapter 1. I remember finding this tedious because there was no immediate explanation for the whole premise, like where they are, and the Mortys were the only sympathetic main characters. We start out on day 14 with two Mortys lying down in a kind of dark place with one having bags under his eyes called Mermaid Morty. Morty is asked if that's him because it's dark and he says he'll find something to eat. At first, Mermaid begs him not to leave him because it's dark and he doesn't want to be lonely. So things are dragged out in a way that isn't worth it because Morty's just repeating that he'll get him food. He also says that he'll get him a crossword puzzle because he's gotta be bored. I like that the writer thought of that. Morty then climbs up and runs away, only to see some bags of food serving as bait hanging from a tree. And his reaction at least implies that he knows it's a trap because otherwise he'd just be happy. He jumps over to it and then ends up being hit by a shocking stun gun by Rick dressed like a hunter. He drags Morty away in a net, and Morty wastes time telling him to let go, thinking that would work for no reason. Hunter says amusingly that this is punishment for being stupid enough to try to eat naturally occurring pre-packaged snacks, saying it was an obvious trap. It's kind of funny that he outright tells him, juice comes from grapes, which grow from the ground. Nothing grows juice boxes. Juice is just an idiot stopping point between fruit and alcohol. Of course he'd say that. Morty then says that he's gotta let him go and says that the snacks were for someone else, which alerts Hunter to the fact that he's got a little friend for him to catch as well. I wanna know why he wants to catch Mortys. I guess Morty thought telling him about his friend would be a good idea because he's used to thinking of him as his dear grandfather and thinks that it'd be better if Mermaid got captured so he'd get food. But never mind on that because he immediately lies that it's just him and thinks that it's better this way, despite apologizing quietly. So he thinks it's better to let Mermaid starve to death? When Hunter said, "That's just what I thought," I immediately thought that was too stupid for him because he believed him right away for no reason. If he knew he was lying, why didn't he just threaten him? Or stay silent? Also, the implication is that Mermaid didn't make it anyways. The X's over his eyes were so jarring that they actually did achieve a good effect, because you never see that in something genuinely serious like this. Well, it's too silly a premise to be too serious, hence why there's funny dialogue. Hunter drags Morty into a room with caged Mortys, being happy about it. At this point, Morty shouldn't think that he can convince him to let him go by saying he's a terrible fighter who never won a battle. He'll capture any Morty. And having him look just like the regular Morty is too confusing. He references the scary universe where aliens are murderers and walk on their hands, and then says that the point is that if he wanted quality fighters, he has a portal gun and low-risk awareness. But what he really wants is quantity. Fortunately, he explains after this that there are some people he wants dead. So overwhelming the Council of Ricks with sheer numbers might actually be a good idea because a Rick could handle any threat, no matter how strong, if only because of his ray gun force field generator. So sheer numbers is the only way. Like keeping them distracted. And I guess capturing Mortys with Pokeballs he took forever to make is less effort than just building a huge robot army. Like building a robot factory that automatically makes robots. Maybe he stole the Pokeballs or bought them. Morty nervously asks why Hunter doesn't capture Summers instead, bringing up the fact that Summer might be an interdimensional badass and therefore a better fighter. Which is why that plan didn't work out. She'd fight him. Right before something jarringly disturbing almost happens, as Hunter's about to make sure Morty couldn't have children, which is even illogical because why would he assume a wimp like Morty that he doesn't respect would ever have a chance of having children on him? He turns around and says something that makes sense on two levels, after Morty bit through the net to run away. Since Hunter was talking, maybe that's why I didn't hear him until it was too late. He shoots Morty in the shoulder with a device that's actually loose. And he says that Rick must have been wasted when he loaded the gun because his thoughts aren't being controlled. Again, a confirmation of brainwashing would make Pokemon make more sense. But this is also a great demonstration of why it's actually better that this isn't confirmed, because that'd be scary for a kids' series. We're supposed to think it's sweet that people own Pokemon. But this is for adults, so it's allowed to be realistic. If he can just brainwash, then how did he not just easily enslave the Summers and go after them instead of Mortys? If he could just shoot any Summer he wants or something like that, it wouldn't matter if she could fight him off. It makes sense if he just reminded him that he needs his Morty waves to hide him from the Galactic Federation, and so having a bunch of Mortys is killing two birds with one stone. It's a good thing the Rick that we see most of the time has the standards to not use brainwashing chips all the time. Morty runs and hides behind a door in a dark room, and he has to deal with a scary-looking Morty referencing a dark joke from the show. But his appearance is at least kinda offset properly by the fact that he's too cheerful, because he's used to being blind. So rather than it just being there to scare us like you'd expect, there's a layer, as the writer thought about how that bee formed and made it a joke. Then Aunt Morty says that he doesn't know if he's zapped by the chip for running off because he can't feel a thing. Well, that kinda explains why he's cheerful instead of freaking out as much by the stuff on his face. It's really nice of Morty to insist on helping Aunt escape, even though he looks so disturbing. Of course he walks in the wrong direction at first, and says, "Sorry Morty, I couldn't see ya," as Morty has to push him, looking humorously annoyed. Then Hunter catches up with him, and even though he's right behind him, he doesn't go capture Morty right away and all the time they're talking. But this might be because he thinks Morty is going to lead him to some other Mortys. Morty reveals that he's been to this place before and it's hard on him, and then Hunter threatens them. Morty calls him out perfectly, and he says that he's no more evil than Pokemon. So that's trying to explain the premise a bit more, as the Ricks are literally imitating Pokemon to live out the fantasy. Maybe sufficiently evil people would do that if they could because of the portal gun. He says he's never gonna fight for him, chip or not. How desperate is he that he thinks he'll ever let him go? He's told that he can go if he wants. And then Morty says that he can't just leave all these Mortys. At first I was really confused by the Deus Ex Machina taking advantage of Rick's soft side for Mortys, making the whole arc confusing if it exists. Then it turns out that, realistically, the chips are programmed so that pulling them out kills the person. And this scares the Mortys, and one of them immediately accuses him of being evil Morty, even though he's right there, obviously. And his reaction clearly proves it was an accident. So, Hunter knew this would happen, and that's why it was like that. Hunter says that as usual, Morty's doing something stupid to do his job for him. Morty admits he's a bad fighter, but then quickly grabs the gun and points it at him, says that he has to find something he's good at so he won't just be plain Morty, and runs away. The story ends with him finding a bunch of Mortys having fun like it's no big deal in the woods. But somehow they aren't being made to fight. Pocket Mortys Issue 2. Morty walks into a house where all the Mortys around him are just eating snacks and dumb hats, and then he panics and hopes another Morty won't hurt himself, being naturally traumatized from earlier because he assumes he might get another Morty killed. Then a girl is nice enough to put her hand on his shoulder and say there's no crying in Morty Collector, and he asks what that is, and she inexplicably doesn't care to explain. She hands him something and says to put this on before they get in trouble. She says he's coming, and they see Crazy Cat Rick show up, and the Mortys are happy about it. Well, at least they have a fun life with someone who's happy with them instead of him hurting them. And they're clearly happy, unless they're being brainwashed to be happy, but that's better than them being miserable. He calls them cast-offs, and says a confusing pop culture reference I didn't get is a long-winded way of, I guess, complimenting them because he's smiling. He calls himself their father, and a cop Morty says he's clocking out and leaving because he has a wife and kids back home. This Rick's creepy. Maybe because he smiles too much. Too widely. Why did you think that he'd get in trouble for not wearing a hat? I guess because he needs a way to look different, but why? He does look different. He says he wanted a new Morty for a long time, having somehow expected that he'd have been able to get a new Morty in particular from the method he was trying earlier. So, did he lose his original Morty and was that traumatized that he's trying to compensate? Because a lot of Ricks don't care if they lose their Morty. Morty admits he's a moron who was tricked by the nice stuff. This does make way more sense as a way for the Mortys to have a happy life on this planet. Crazy Cat says that he's not making Morty fight because he's a wimp. And for once his gross dialogue puts me at ease because he's talking like normal Rick for once instead of being creepy, making me worry that it'll be the worst kind of dark turn. Morty says that he never thought he'd meet another Rick he wasn't scared of, but he has his head on straight, despite his clothing. He gives Morty some kibble, somehow thinking that's good enough, and Morty's hungry enough to try it anyways and enjoys it. I wish it was explained that all the Mortys on this planet were clones. Then at night, he starts sneaking around. But suddenly it turns out Crazy Cat's in the room and still awake. So he sneaks off, but then it turns out he used a toy toilet by accident in the dark. Why in the world would someone as smart as Rick think that making a toy toilet with no plumbing, or buying one, was a good idea? Morty says he's got places to be, changing his mind out of fear, and he's told to pay up. Crazy Cat at least justifies that all the stuff in his house for the Mortys don't pay for themselves. Morty says they naturally assumed they didn't have to pay for it since it was so nice. Also, how would they get the money? He should have said that. At first I was expecting them to be actors in a show and so they'd get paid. I thought they were in a set of a fake house in a filming studio. He says he's got a plan for Morty, rather than killing him or kicking him out. So naturally Morty jumps at the chance to be idealistic of him out of desperation. It's shockingly annoying that he wastes 2 other panels with this. Why does he think he's evil Morty? Out of nowhere, he's suddenly trying to make sure he'd never be able to have kids when he knows he's a wimp. And if he thinks Morty's rare, why is he doing this anyways? It was so obvious that things would go wrong because they were being too nice to Morty. But this isn't as bad as I expected. I mean, this kind of thing tried to happen before. Suddenly, his device beeps and he says that it's cute that one of the Mortys found a box that he almost doesn't fit in. So he decides to go see up close. And I guess he thinks he's under severe time constraint, because he conveniently decides this is more important. Then why did he try to do this in the first place? At least this meant things didn't really go too dark. But it feels underwhelming how confusing Morty's victory here was. So he finds another Rick in a field, and says he can't take the chance of trusting another one. This one's Hippie Rick, who tells him he has nothing to fear, and somehow wastes time asking why he's encountering Ricks when he's trying to save Mortys. How do you know he's trying to save Mortys? I guess because every runaway Morty's trying to do that, and he knows Mortys. He's high, and Morty says he smells, and is so tired of it that he just wants to be told what to do already. It turns out that Hippie has a bunch of Mortys as slave labor on the farm to keep him buzzed. And it's good that it's pointed out that living communally is the same thing as slavery. I'm actually relieved to see that he does have a dark side, because at least I'm seeing what the catch is with him right away. And they could have a worse life than this. Well, at least we're seeing trainers that don't just make the Mortys fight. Twice in a row. That's creative. And this Rick does what Pokemon could not. Well, the previous one, it makes sense that there would be crazy Pokemon ladies. Like, it's kind of like a spoof on the people who try to catch them all. Only, the Pokemon are actually living instead of trapped in the PC and doing nothing. It was more like a Morty daycare. Morty gets given a bottle to drink up for story time, and is told that the Mortys put motivational messages under the cap. And it's foreshadowing that they might be unhappy because the message just says, "This is pretty okay, I guess." He says as Morty's dumb enough to drink what he gave him, that their story starts long ago when this place was different. If he's a native to this planet, wouldn't he already know the history of the planet? I guess he really is a clone who was just born. I don't want to believe that all the Mortys were just kidnapped from their home dimensions. It's amusing that because he's so out of it, he thinks Morty can see into his vision back in the past. Hippie says that in the past, there weren't any Rick and Mortys. This reality was always based on the idea of trainers and pets. Everyone on this planet grew up training and battling the cute little wildlife that occurs, and it became the driving force behind the economy. But eventually, they discovered that there was one type of little pet fiercer than all of the others, and smarter. A Rick. So there used to be Pocket Ricks, which eventually wiped out all the non-Rick pets. And then the Ricks turned on the people. So they weren't brainwashed? But brainwashing must have been happening with the previous pets, or the ones that participated in the fighting and been domesticated properly. If only Ricks know how to make those lethal if removed to brainwashing chips, which would make sense, then why were animals before him controlled properly? I was assuming Pokeballs were a natural part of the world. How could they have rebelled and taken over the world instead of staying brainwashed? What happened? I guess they were always immune to brainwashing, and just didn't reveal it until they stopped feeling like fighting. Nah. I guess this is showing the first time 2 Ricks were pinned against each other. And it's showing that none of the Ricks were dumb enough to challenge each other to a fight. Like, just say the Ricks wanted to prove which Morty was the strongest. Also, it's needlessly confusing that one of the Ricks that rebelled right away looks like Doofus Rick when he couldn't be. So here it's revealed that there are tons of Doofus Ricks. That's a weird coincidence. So anyways, what does the Hippie Rick think he has to gain in wasting all this time telling Morty how the past was? History building is good, but this came out of nowhere in the story. He explains that when the battle was won, the Pocket Ricks still craved fighting, and they knew where to get their new combatants. Morty somehow assumes that he's saying he needs to gather the other Mortys and rebel. It should be obvious the Mortys are wimpier than Ricks and could never win over them. Morty has been too much of an idiot this arc. I like that Hippie said he hates violence. At least he has that over the other Ricks. He says that the Ricks figured a rebellion might happen again, so their failsafe was a council of Ricks. I'm not sure if I like this story because Crazy Cat Rick was too creepy. But at least Hippie was nice and gave us world building. We got to see trainers who don't just make the Mortys fight each other like it's a total ripoff.